All right, this is a video lesson for U2L5, which is analyzing graphs. So there's a lot in this lesson to digest here. We're going to go through some vocab at the beginning. And the first thing is identifying whether something is increasing, decreasing, or constant on a particular interval. So increasing, a function is increasing on an interval if its y values increase as the x values increase. So if x goes up, y goes up too. That means increasing. You notice in all of these definitions, x is increasing, and we're looking at what y does. Okay. Decreasing, a function is decreasing on an interval if its y values decrease as x increases. A constant, a function is constant on an interval if its y values stay the same as its x values increase. So I want you to try these three problems and then look ahead and fast forward to see what I do. For the first one, I'm seeing that as x increases, my graph is going up. So I'm going to say that this is increasing. On my second one, as x increases, I'm seeing that my y's are going down. This is decreasing. And on the third one, I know it's hard to see, but I'm seeing that nothing's changing as x increases. It's not going up or down. That's constant. Now, we talk about whether things are increasing or decreasing on an interval, so we need to be able to label intervals or know what they are. So sometimes functions change. They're increasing in one place on the graph, decreasing on another, constant on another. We need to be able to identify what these sections of the graph are, and we call those intervals. Interval notation, it's really important that you understand that this is not an ordered pair. Instead, what interval notation is it's a smallest x value through a biggest x value for a chunk of the graph. Okay, it's a smallest to a biggest x value on a particular chunk of graph. So for 1b, they're going to ask us here, they want us to look above at the three graphs that we use to decide if things were constant or increasing or decreasing, and write what interval we're seeing on those graphs. So for 1b, we're actually looking at 1a to make that decision. So on 1a, the smallest x is right here at -1. That's the smallest x that has an output on this graph. The biggest x is over here, which is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this graph goes from -1 to 5. Those are the x's on that graph. So we're going to write -1 to 5. Notice that I'm using a closed bracket. You learn later in math that there's times to use closed and times to use open. We're going to use closed just so you don't think this means an ordered pair. Instead, it's telling you a stretch of the graph from -1 through 5. 2b, we're going to look at 2a. And on 2a, the furthest left we get on this graph is at -1, 2, 3, 4. And the furthest right we get is at +3. So we're going from -4 through +3. That's the part of the graph that we're looking at, is -4 through +3. We're only talking about x's when we're doing interval notation. This graph over here for 3, we see that it starts over here at -2, and it ends over here. It's not labeled, but that's at 7. So -2 through 7 is the interval notation for that graph. Now, this problem down here is the reason we need interval notation. We see that this graph changes. In one particular section of the graph, it's increasing. In another part of the graph, it's constant. In a third part of the graph, it's increasing. So we have three different sections of this graph, and this is where interval notation is going to come in handy. This increasing section of the graph, it's happening from -2, this is -1, this is -2, until +2. So we're going to go over here to the increasing part, and we're going to say that this is happening from -2 to +2. Then the graph is remaining constant from that same positive 2 until this positive, not 2, this positive 4 right here. This constant part of the graph right here, that's happening from 2 to 4. So not decreasing, this is 2 to 4 for constant. Then this third section of the graph seems to stop here, and that's going from 4 to 6. And that is also increasing. So we're going to put a second interval of increasing here. There are no sections of the graph that are not increasing, or sorry, that are decreasing. So that we're just going to write none. There's no sections or intervals of the graph that are decreasing. So these three intervals that we've written off to the side are there to explain to whoever's grading that we understand that the graph is increasing in two different spots of the graph. One spot is -2 to 2 on the x-axis, and the other spot is 4 to 6 on the x-axis. And there's one spot of the graph where it is constant, and that's from 2 to 4. Now, another thing that you need to know about a graph is highest and lowest points. So the maximum of a graph is the highest y value, or greatest. The minimum is the lowest y value of any points on the graph. So when we look at this graph here for 4, and I'll probably walk you through 4 and then kind of instruct you on 5 and 6 to go and do what we normally do, which is pause and look ahead. We're going to just answer these 5 different questions about this graph. So first, they ask, where is this graph increasing? Well, I notice that this graph is in 3 sections. Here's a section, changes directions. Here's a section, changes directions. Here's a section. Well, the section I just highlighted blue, that's the only spot that it's increasing as you move left to right. And that's happening from 4 to 6. So it's increasing from 4 to 6. This green section is where it's decreasing over here. And that's from -5, that's from -5 over to -2, So -5 to -2, it's decreasing. This section from -2 to 4 is where it's remaining constant. Now, minimum. What they're asking for is the lowest y value on the graph. And it looks to me like the lowest the y ever gets is in this constant section. It never gets lower. I never see any outputs, any points that are lower than this, and that's happening at 3. So my minimum is at 3, and my maximum, I never see the graph get higher than this height up here, which is at 9. I never see the graph get higher than 9. That's a maximum. So I want you to try 5 and 6 and then pause and come back and see what I did. So on this graph, I'm seeing a couple of increasing sections. Looks like that's happening from -5 to -2. And that it's increasing again from +4 over to 5. +4 to 5. Decreasing, I see one section of decreasing. Looks like it's decreasing from -2 down to +2, -2 to 2. And then constant, I'm seeing that constant section right there from 2 to 4. Minimum, the lowest this graph ever gets, seems to be -8. Maximum, the highest this graph ever seems to get is 7. And finally, number 6, we are increasing over here from 3 to 6 we are decreasing over here from, it looks like it's -1 over to 3. I don't see any constant sections, so I'm going to say none. My lowest point on this graph appears to be at a height of 2. See, that point's the lowest point on the graph, so that's as low as it ever gets at 2. And my maximum, the highest it ever gets, seems to be up here at 6. And that's it. That's all the things that we need to be able to do in this section. So that's the end of this lesson.